Hello and welcome to FAQ number 3 for season 2. We've got a whole bunch of different questions loaded up. I'm just going to read them, go through them as per usual, and see if I can make it all the way to the end. So first question, have you considered trying the humic acid concentrate for water and foliar? My ladies have been praying ever since I started using it. Great question. We carry different humic acid products, and oftentimes they're incorporated into other products. Rootwise has small amounts of humic acid in it to stabilize the microbes and give them some initial food, so we're definitely using it. Also, our Big 6 is chelated in humic acid, and that's what we use for micronutrients. From Faust BioAg, we also really like the TM7, which is the same thing as our Big 6, except for instead of getting the iron from that, we use rock dust. And so that's why ours has 6 and the TM7 has 7. And there's also Cytoplus, which is humic seaweed extract in the micronutrients. Beyond that, we do just use basic plain humic occasionally. The idea with humic acid is that if you have a good amount of humic acid, like even on just a regular agricultural field, small amount will really help unlock phosphorus and some other nutrients. And I do feel like it's definitely an advantage. Foliar spraying, it's pretty black, and I don't like to foliar spray stuff that stains the leaves, although I don't see a reason why not. I think that fulvic is better for foliar spray based on the way that it transports across the leaf. Now, you can use fulvic acid in the soil, but I tend to use fulvic acid as a chelator to lower the energy required for the plants to take it up in a foliar spray. So if I want to use an amino, add some fulvic. If I want to do any sort of like Organics Alive or anything like that, if I was going to foliar spray it, add some fulvic acid. Similarly, when you're making a organic concoction that you want to root drench, compost tea, adding in anything like that, you can throw some humic in there. I also believe that our soil has some decent humic content from all the compost, and so it's not something that's high on my list of must add all the time. I hope that answers your question. There is some deeper conversations about humic acid. I know when I first started learning about it, I learned a little bit from Coot, who introduced me to Dr. Faust, the conversation started about the first material or the first biology that would inhabit the fresh volcanic flow on the Hawaiian Islands. And they were able to kind of understand how you went from volcano rock, so just the lava flow, to a high canopy rainforest and how it can happen so quickly. And so the lichen was one of the first material that came to eat the rock, to break it down, to make the minerals available, and then birds and seed and plants and everything started to begin. And so Faust was using some of these original biology and started some of the creation of his products. He was using like vortex rainwater, and so I learned a lot about humic acid from him, and you can still to this day learn a lot from Dr. Faust. Part of what I learned is that there is a lot of misinformation in the humic and fulvic industry. It is snake oil if you buy it from the wrong person, and it's a quality input if you buy it from the right person. So do your own research. Don't just blindly buy anything that says humic acid. Sometimes it's not worth the money at all, and sometimes it's a really good product. Next, Toro. One question I have, would the Formula EM5 work to wash buds with when harvesting, or has anyone tried it? I do have customers that say they use EM5 diluted at 1 to 6 ounces per gallon, just like we recommend, and they use it for bud washing. I don't like the bud wash. Obviously, if you're outdoor and you're worried about there being dirt on there, having the surfactant, having all of the vinegar and everything else in there would probably cut the dirt and absorb it. And a lot of times when I see people do bud washing, they're having like a consistent flow in a 55-gallon barrel of clean water. And then they go to another one and they dunk it, and that one's just got regular water. And then they go to another one and another one and another one, and they get dirty and clean as you go to the end. I'd imagine you could put one of the middle buckets to be like EM5, or one of the first buckets, and then do several other plain water washes afterwards to make sure you're removing any of the EM5. I also believe that since it's not potassium hydroxide soap, it's actually plant-based materials and organic apple cider vinegar and all that, it's possible that it wouldn't cause any issue. However, I don't like the idea of putting something on my flower, and I'd be very, very cautious to do so. So another thing with the EM5 that might give you some confidence is that I have a lot of growers that have reported back to me they use it up to the day of harvest to foliar spray and clean. A lot of times it's because they're outdoor, they've either got ashes, they're doing bud washing, they're worried about it, so they'll spray it on the plant while it's alive. Then they'll do their regular bud washing afterwards. I've heard of other people just doing it because they were worried about powdery mildew. They wanted to really keep it at bay, and so they would just keep spraying. So it's not how the label designs the product to be used, but you can read every ingredient in there and you can decide for yourself. Let's go on to the next one. Miles D says, just bought the Take and Bake kit, stoked. He says, excited to get a 3x3 bed of my own going. I'm curious, I've seen some stuff about integrating sand, silt, and clay when building soils to mimic nature more closely. It's a good question. Especially in no-till. What are your thoughts on adding these sorts of structural inputs to an indoor setup, particularly in your pre-made kit recipes? So what we do is we incorporate a basalt that's not a fine flour. We actually get it mined locally, and it's from the Grand Mesa, which if you research is one of the largest flat tops in the United States. It's got like 300 little ponds and lakes on it. It's a jungle up there. It's incredible, and it's completely encapsulated in basalt. And so we have a company that crushes it, and when we get the crush, it's not powdered or floured. And I like that because of this very specific question. It's got sand in it, it's got basalt chunks in it, as big as like little 1/4-inch chunks, and it's got some flour that's fully broken down in it, all of the different gradients there. And when we mix that into our soil, we get the benefit of the paramagnetic energy of the basalt. And you can do a lot of research on paramagnetic energy. Phil Callahan, check out his books, the Phil Callahan meter. They have a way to kind of measure that power. Totally fun to research. But adding the basalt with the type that we use adds all of that structure. Where if you just buy a flour, it's more for the actual micronutrients than it is for the structure. Alternatively, what we've done is purchased sand, and we've mixed it in different recipes before. I feel like I'm cutting the recipe with something that's cheap and something that's not totally necessary, and it's not in every soil. A lot of times it's not a totally sandy soil, it's more clay. The challenge with trying to mimic an exact structure is that we're just making a potting soil. And if we mimic exactly how nature does it, a lot of times it ends up too heavy for a potting soil container. So many people have suggested putting rock dust down in the bottom, copious amounts of it, lava rock, all sorts of stuff. Thus kind of building your breathability layer and your mineral layer, then putting the potting soil on it. And then it's kind of like in nature where you have the decaying organic matter and then you have the mineral area. And I think that a SIP represents that fairly well. So I've done SIP containers where I've put copious amounts of rock dust down below. I've done beds where I've done mini hugelkultur where I've buried wood in there. I've done beds where I've put lots of rock dust on the bottom on top of grow stone and lava rock. And I've not seen a significant enough of a difference for me to gravitate towards one of these methods. They all were really fun to do. I didn't see any negative to doing it, but it wasn't like a game changer. I think more, you could increase the yield and quality by getting a soil test and addressing the nutrition a lot more than trying to mimic the texture versus ingredients perfectly. Texture is important, don't get me wrong. If you get it too light, that's not gonna hold water. If you get it too heavy, it's not gonna breathe. But how you get that texture and how you choose those ingredients ultimately affects the chemical soil profile when you get it tested at the lab. And so if you get that right, the plants will crush. There's not a one right way to do this, but if you do it wrong, it won't work. So keep that in mind. I definitely agree with that, but I didn't find it particularly necessary for everybody. That's why we've not incorporated it into the BuildASoil way. So I hope that makes sense. Next question, Minish. What are you using to trigger the exhaust on top of your tent? Okay, so if you're watching, you'll see a little white temperature dangler, and it's in the back of quadrant 3. And that is reading the temperature and humidity. And when the temperature drops below 82 as programmed in my NIWA app, N-I-W-A, it's a power strip that we carry, and you can program it, and then once it's programmed, you can put it in your grow room, and it'll either run and update you on Wi-Fi, or it'll just run, even without Wi-Fi. But it'll go off your recipe. My recipe right now is 82 degrees. If I put the temperature lower than that, the fan will be on a little bit more consistently, because I'm not air conditioning, and that'll draw the humidity out, and the humidity will be running a lot more. And with LED, I like to stimulate the activity of the plants by having a little bit more temperature. Enzymes and nutrient release in organic soil is often based on that temperature. So the NIWA is the short answer, and I have an intake in case you didn't notice, and that one is on low 100% of the time. So even when the exhaust is off, I'm bringing fresh air in, so there's fresh CO2 in there. Okay, so Linus says, why do you recommend to stop adding aloe to the water after flower starts? I don't think that you have to. A lot of people add aloe all the way through. Some people have said it helps with a number of things. I'll tell you where it came from. We want to save money, and I don't want to just spend stuff haphazardly and just throw stuff at it. And loading it and using it throughout veg, it seems to help a lot. And when we were learning about the salicylic acid, jasminic acid pathway, if you research that, that's one of the avenues that plants control their hormones. And so the thought is that as they go into flower, they veer away from this salicylic acid and they start this jasminic acid. And so people have even played with the idea that later in flower, it's been proven through white papers that if mountain sage is eaten by an animal, it puts off jasminic acid, and that increased the trichomes on the plants of tobacco that were growing near it, and probably tomato and probably cannabis as well. It's a plant response. So the thought is, instead of hammering what potentially could have salicylic acid in it, now, I think if we test the aloe that we're offering, it's just a homeopathic amount, like it's a natural amount. It's not like it's an extract of salicylic acid, like aspirin or something. You probably can use it all the way through. The thought is, though, that the plants probably don't require that and would probably do better switching their pathways over. So we just switched to coconut to save money. Coconut's got some killer potassium, lots of sugars, good things for flowering. So take it for what it is. We definitely didn't invent all of this, and we're just learning as we go. So you could use aloe, but we recommend just to save money and switch over. We've done it both ways and not seen a huge reason to keep spending on the aloe. So Alexis, hey, where do you get your garden bed? What size is it? We work with Grassroots fabric pots. We really like them. They've got a plastic, BPA-free plastic liner on the inside of the beds. And so that means when you've got a big bed full of potting soil, if the air's moving around there or if it's outside and it's dry, the soil will dry from the outside to the in. Where when it's got the plastic liner on the inside, it stays nice and moist for the worms and for the soil and for the biology, but it still has no plastic in the bottom, so it still breathes down low, so it won't get root rot. We have a 3x3 bed in the quadrant 2. That's the one that you're seeing there. And then the way that they work is you buy them, they're very affordable because they're easy to ship, they just fold up. When you get it, you're gonna buy your own 1-inch PVC and cut it to size and build the kit so you have the bed. And in that way, it's the most economical, best bed. Check it out. You can buy those at BuildASoil.com. Next, Chris43 says, the diversity in the tent is a great idea. Thank you. It covers a lot of ground with useful info, and it's always refreshing when the teacher loves what he does. Makes learning such a breeze. I guess this one was just a comment, but thank you. And it does lead into something. We did it on purpose. It's not something that I accidentally did to add all that diversity. One of my goals with creating an educational series was to cover as much ground as possible. And so if I can do earth boxes, 5 gallons, big containers, big pots, everything all at once, it accomplishes 2 goals. One, it teaches you based on how you might be doing it, based on your situation with your grow tent. Not everybody wants to whip up a bed on the 3rd floor in their apartment, right? Have a whole bunch of soil. So I don't want to make that a limiting factor. That's why we're doing the 5 gallons and the earth boxes. But the other thing is that it should take some of the magic away. It works there, it works here, it works there, it works with this. It doesn't freaking matter. You just good in, good out, and you have to follow basic principles, and you can do this 1,000 ways. So don't think that the one way you see me do it is the only way. That's a big part of the reason why we're showing 4 different methods in there, and we could show a dozen others, and they would all work. Thank you for mentioning that. Jason, can you explain on when, how, and the details of the use of Eden Blue Gold Fusion flour? Can you just use that as a flower feed and get good results? They recommend a few different ways to feed. They've got the home version that just recommends a certain amount to use. Like you can use a tablespoon per gallon. You could use a teaspoon per gallon. There's lots of ways to do it. Lots of growers have overused it, underused it. But what they recommend is going based on the ppm in the water. And so if you've got a ppm meter and your water's clean, you can kind of dose a level that makes sense. They also have some acreage recommendations. Most of the guys that use it here at the shop, they end up using very, very small amounts of it because it's supplementing their living soil. So I would say a teaspoon per gallon, and you'll be totally fine to use the Blue Gold Fusion as a feed. And it's one of the best feeds that we've ever seen. I have had some people that are really into the natural way, like doing their own water only or compost teas, top dresses. And they've said that while the results were phenomenal, it may have changed the direction of the taste a little bit. I would encourage you to play with different amounts, not just on the plant response, but how the finished product works. And I believe when you're feeding soluble, less is more. And with Blue Gold, it's got the wetting agent, the micronutrients, the NPK, literally everything. And so less, more often, in my opinion, works way better than trying to put a whole bunch in every once in a while. You don't see me doing it a lot. One of the reasons why, I'll just bring it up right now, is we've kind of drawn a line in the sand where I've mentioned I don't like using guanos and calcium nitrates and different types of products that are approved for organic use that may not be above board for BuildASoil. We've broken the rule here because they use so many heady ingredients at Blue Gold. They're so above and beyond with their intuitiveness and their science and the way that they're next level with ferments and stuff that I didn't know existed at that commercial level. And I'm blown away by Blue Gold. So nothing I can take away from them, but when I have a product that has a little bit of guano in it and some other ingredients that I don't individually sell, it kind of keeps me from pumping it to the front as one of our favorite products. And we've also very much been the type of business that says, hey, build your soil, have lots of it, and you don't have to rely on all these products. But one of my customers' favorite products, we sell out of it in the shop all the time. All the locals walk in and buy it. So if you haven't heard of it, check it out. I'm gonna do a standalone video soon on the Blue Gold lineup, and we'll discuss what I've learned over the last couple years using it, how you can apply it on your own garden and at what dosage. But I think at least in the last minute or two, I've given you some basic parameters. So thanks for that. Also, if you hit up our live chat or support, a lot of the guys you're talking to use Blue Gold, so they can help you answer that question. Brown Red says, can you spray the amazing Dr. Zymes Eliminator insecticide and fungicide directly on top of the soil? Yes. So one of the things that I've noticed, like you'll hear that honey is an antibacterial. Well, dilute it in water and it's not, right? So obviously, a potent amount on a leaf surface could wipe out some small amounts of molds or mildews and whatever very effectively. But I found that the enzymes actually feed the soil, and so if you want to, if you have fungus gnats or if you're worried about something, you can literally create a high dose of that per gallon, mix it in with a high dose of neem oil, high dose of essential oils, make like a killer combo, and you can foliar spray the surface of the soil, and the plants will actually reach and prey. Don't irrigate with it, but like spray the top so that the top inch gets a little bit wet with that. As a standalone, you absolutely can use the amazing Dr. Zymes just to spray the soil surface, and your plants will actually give you a little bit of an enzyme reaction, a perk up, because enzymes help make other nutrition available in the soil. So I wouldn't hesitate to do it. I don't think it's a problem. And you'll notice rove beetles, worms, everything is still popping. Predator mites running around, but anything that eats plant material, instead of being a predator, would probably be negatively affected by it based on their molting cycle and how that all works. Spencer, any suggestions for Build-A-Bloom in flower? Every watering. Every watering is risky. We use micronized calcium phosphate in there, and you want to use small amounts of it, but it builds up. Even though it's somewhat water soluble, the biology can't release all of it immediately. So if you use it every watering, it's going to build up, and if you did a soil test, it'd probably be a little bit high in phosphorus by the end of that round. That being said, you have big plants in a small container, I would say you could totally do it. Less though, like half dose if you're going to do it every watering, not a full dose. The way I use it is like once a week, either before flower or during stretch, in the first half of flower, and then I kind of just cut it out. I feel like I've built up the phosphorus at that point. The plants can use that energy according to their needs. And a lot of guys that are following a more feed the plant paradigm, they're gonna switch over to a higher potassium source as you get towards the end. And so that's where people use a little bit less Build-A-Bloom and a little more coconut water. And that's a way to kind of naturally stack towards the end. Coconut water is typically high in potassium. Also, there's Organics Alive, compost, worm castings, usually very high in potassium. Those are ways to use it. In the BuildASoil system, we don't add tons of bone meal or guanos or anything like that. So the Build-A-Bloom adds to that phosphorus, but you do not have to use it every watering. If you're in a 5 gallon and your plants are big, you probably could, but I would lean towards every other watering, probably at most, and a half dose. So that answers your question. Part of me wants to say, yeah, just use a ton of it, buy more. But I want you to have better results. So that's how we'll keep it. Paggy, what do you use for getting rid of fungus gnats? I got predator mites, but I had no success with them. You know, I swear there's different types. Like some fungus gnats, just not a problem. They just go away. Sometimes it's a nightmare. And it's one of the last challenges for organic gardening. We have compost, fungus gnats love it. Whether they're in your house and show up, whether they come in the compost, if it happens, it can be an issue. And early on, it's usually a bigger issue because you just don't know and you just keep watering heavy and it never breaks the cycle. So one of the things you can do is instead of misting the top of your soil perfectly, you can remove the nozzle and kind of water in 1 or 2 spots a little bit like through the soil surface so that it spreads underneath, not right on top. The other thing is you can scrape the mulch layer off and you can add a barrier, like a fresh, dry top dressing of tons of compost, literally burying them like an inch so that all the fungus gnat larvae and everything is kind of suffocated. The for sure way is people just literally cover the top of their soil with sand, like an inch of it. It's a pain, nobody wants to do it, you don't want it there, it's not as pretty, you gotta take it back out. So that's one way. But I did mention previously a concoction, which sounds like it's something worth talking about. I don't have any gnats right now, so I can't try it. But what I can do is try the efficacy of it not hurting the plants. And I've done it before, and I've literally witnessed dead fungus gnat larvae immediately after application. And what I did was a super quadruple dose of everything that I'm gonna list. Don't follow this blindly. Try something like this and spray a small amount of air on your plant if you're willing to and see what the reaction is. I had really good luck. I did in 1 gallon of water, which I would recommend doing like a quart if you have a small amount of plants and just doing the math on it, 1/4 of what I'm about to say. But in a gallon, you could do, say, 6 to 8 ounces of Dr. Zymes, plus 4 to 6 ounces of essential oil, plus 4 to 6 ounces of neem oil, plus you could add like an 8 times dose of Q or Thermex 70, to really get the bubbles going in there. Shake that up and spray down your soil so that it gets wet in the top 1/2 inch to 1 inch, and you'll literally see fried fungus gnat larva trying to survive wiggling out of the soil, just turning from white into maybe moving to eventually be crispy and dead. And the way that the larvae work is you may not get it all. And organics typically is not an eradicator, but when you see them dead, you know that you just wiped out a big percentage of the entire population. After that, you can go to sticky traps, keeping your watering right, and they should be gone. The good news is when you keep your soil around, you go to like cycle 2, cycle 3, you should just never have fungus gnats again, and the cycle's been broken. Alternatively, I know people that mix up soil, let it get bone dry so that nothing can live, and then they start from there. None of these are perfect answers, but I'm trying to teach you what you might be able to do. I'd like to mix up that spray and actually measure exactly what I use so it's duplicatable and I can tell you. I'll try it. I'll let you know what happens, and I'll update you all with the recipe. Corey, is this the first time we've seen you stoned? Laugh out loud. Oh, this is from the rosin video. No, pretty much every single time you've seen me on camera. But you know that first 10 minutes right after a bowl, like usually I'm not gonna turn the camera on. Like I'll go out smoke, we'll come in, we'll do our thing, get the camera on, get the mic on. But when I took a fat dab and we were immediately recording the second after, I'm pretty sure you saw me get a little bit glazy. So, props to Pedro, it takes a lot to do that. Okay, so to everyone who wants the mushroom farm tour, yes, we will do it soon. In fact, a couple employees were down there today loading up on different mushroom logs and stuff because we're gonna fill our mushroom tent, just max the CO2 and have fun with it. We're gonna do a whole tour down there. There's a couple reasons. One, I just love the guys down there and they run a really good business. Gio, who like manages the place, just become a friend and somebody I like asking questions. And then recently, somebody who I've done some business with in the past just started working there. And so it's like, it's all coming together with synergy. So we will absolutely do the mushroom farm tour soon, and we'll record it and we'll share it with you. Thanks for all the questions. I promise to do more FAQs as we go through season 2. It's always really fun for me to see what you guys have, and also fun for me to just jump on here on the spot and try and answer them without any previous research. I think it keeps us on our toes. It keeps my answers real and not scripted. And if you've got more questions, load them up on the videos as we go. And I'll see you next time.